So the grassroots left, which is a slate for your party, which includes Zarah Sultana, put out a really bad statement. Actually really disappointing, because some people take my criticisms or something, meaning to be that I oppose them, means I have to always caveat with, I support your party and I support them doing well. I support Zarah Sultana and want her to be successful, and of course with all left-wing politicians. But this statement from the grassroots left, I mean, what were they thinking? Gorton and Denton by-election should have had a principled socialist candidate on the ballot. Your party members should have been allowed to democratically elect a candidate, and branches should have been recognised months ago. Grassroots left members on the CEC will fight to immediately recognise your party branches and hand over local data and resources so that such situations cannot be repeated. Grassroots left should not lend unconditional support to the Green Party candidate. Grassroots left will not lend unconditional support to the Green Party candidate because the Greens are a pro-capitalist, pro-NATO party and have been enforcing cuts in councils all over the country. And that is a really disappointing statement. I think it's a silly statement and I think it's wrong. They could have just said nothing. They literally could have just not had a statement, but they've decided to pick into left fights with the Greens.
Before we continue with the video, there's been an update because politics moves fast. Zarah Sultana has released a statement and she's backing Hannah Spencer. The unelected interim leadership of your party has still not formalised local branches or ensured members have access to their own data. This should have been resolved months ago, allowing local members to democratically select a your party candidate for the upcoming Gorton and Denton by-election. The candidate list is now published, and it is clear that Hannah Spencer, a local plumber and trade unionist, is the strongest contender to Labour and Reform. I am therefore giving my personal critical support to see her and the Green Party in this by-election, and I urge others to do the same. I've always been clear that the left is strongest when it's united. Our real opponents are not one another. They are Reform and the far right. As a young Muslim woman, I understand viscerally what it would mean for the far right to gain power in this country. This is not an abstract debate for me, nor the millions of people across the country whose safety would be directly affected. That is why I want your party to become what it was founded to be, a mass working class party that unites the left, provides a genuine socialist and anti-imperialist alternative, and prevents Nigel Farage and his cronies from ever getting the keys to Downing Street. Together, your party will be that vehicle. Ultimately, defeating fascism must be our #1 priority. So absolute support for Zarah Sultana. This is so based, this is a win. And this is the right decision, and I'm glad she's come out and said it. That is what integrity looks like. So for the rest of the video, bear that in mind. I don't think I directly critique Zarah Sultana. I'm not quite sure, I can't actually remember. But remember, when you're watching this video, Zarah Sultana has backed Hannah Spencer.
Now, the Workers' Party even stood down. Now, the Workers' Party, I don't like George Galloway, despise their social conservatism, and the Workers' Party and the Greens disagree on so much, yet the Workers stood down because they realised, you know what, we need to defeat Labour and Reform. The Greens are the best party to win it, and the Greens thanked them for it. Now you had, and I hate categorising it as this, but it's kind of true. You got the Jeremy Corbyn and Zarah Sultana faction. Jeremy Corbyn is on the For the Many slate for the CC elections, and the grassroots left includes Zarah Sultana. The For the Many slate voted to not stand a candidate. Now they didn't mention the Greens in their statement, and I really don't care. People are like, oh, why didn't they mention the Greens? It's petty. Who cares? Doesn't matter. They did the right thing, if you ask me, which is to not stand a candidate. But the grassroots left are actually attacking the Greens when they don't need to be attacked. Now, why are they doing this? I mean, Reform and the Greens are the two, or are like 1 and 2. Internal party data from the Greens shows that Reform are on 39% and the Greens are on 35%. With an election within 2 weeks, that 4% deficit makes me very uncomfortable. 4% is a lot of votes. Now, 4% in a long-term general election campaign, that's so winnable and it's so doable. You can overcome that with only like 2 weeks, because the by-election was designed to be minimal impact and to be as short as possible because Labour want to hold on to their seat. And of course, if the government makes a short by-election, it makes outsider parties harder to campaign. But of course, Labour has destroyed their chances because they got rid of Andy Burnham, which now means that Reform are most likely to win because they obviously have mass national prominence. Like, they have that going for them. The Greens aren't quite as prominent nationally. So Labour have like gifted this seat to Reform, despite the fact that the demographic is very favourable to the Greens. Reform still have the upper hand. Not to say the Greens can't win. They absolutely have a shot. and they need every single vote they can get. And that's the thing. They need every single vote they can get, and the grassroots left are willing to increase the chances of reform, who are also pro-NATO, who are absolutely pro-capitalist, they're pro-Zionist, they're anti-worker, they're anti-dealing with climate change. Like, all the politics that we hate. Matt Goodwin, I actually do think he's from the far right as well. I mean, he's pushed some really disgusting politics. He was on Novara Media, and he kind of insinuated, or at least alluded to, race science, which is fucking wild. And the grassroots left are saying, basically, we're not going to endorse the Greens. Now, no one's asking for unconditional support from the Greens. That's not what unconditional support means. It's just saying, maybe we should just back the Greens in this particular seat because they have a shot of winning. The second part of the statement, I think, is utterly ridiculous. They're not a pro-NATO and pro-capitalist party. That is an absurd statement. Now, yes, in the manifesto, they are committing to staying in NATO and reforming it from within. It's kind of similar to saying, stay in the EU and reform it. They're kind of nonsense policies because you can't reform it, right? It's true. You can't reform NATO from within, and you probably couldn't have reformed the EU from within, which is actually fair play to Zach Polanski. He openly said on Channel 4 News that I don't think that's even possible. But just because, and you might disagree with this, and to be fair, lots of people will disagree with this on this channel in terms of NATO, which I love, by the way. I don't want this channel to be like an echo chamber. I love it when people disagree. My stance on NATO is a bit nuanced, right? It's absolutely true that NATO is an imperialist, pro-capitalist organization. It's not a good organization, but I also think it's the devil you know, because at the moment, we do have the threat of Russia. And I'm sorry, but Russia, to the tiny amount of people who simp for Russia, it's not a socialist country, right? It's a state capitalist country. They're imperialist, right? They are a threat. And having a military alliance is better than not having one at all. I think Zach actually has the best position on this. He's like, we need to have a European alliance without the US because you can't trust the US. But what makes no sense about this is Jeremy Corbyn, Zarah Sultana, they were members of the Labour Party. Jeremy was leader, and obviously Zarah was a Labour MP. And they asked us to back the Labour Party in 2017 and 2019, despite the fact that the Labour Party are intrinsically pro-NATO. They are massively pro-NATO. It's a very pro-NATO party. And Jeremy Corbyn didn't dare touch that policy. Understandably, I think he's actually kind of a pragmatic guy. Some people criticize him for not. I actually think he's kind of pragmatic. Maybe too pragmatic in some senses, but in terms of NATO, it made sense. I mean, he was never going to win that battle. Why was it okay for Labour MPs, particularly someone like Zarah Sultana on the left, to say, yeah, back this Labour Party with pretty vile people inside it? I mean, Peter Mandelson was in the Labour Party and they said they should vote for it. We had Margaret Hodge inside the Labour Party who wanted to destroy Corbyn, expected us to vote for the Labour Party. You can't vote for the Greens, and we're not going to back the Greens because they're pro-NATO and pro-capitalist. That makes no sense. Now, I reject that they're pro-NATO. Being part of the devil you know I think is a different argument. I mean, again, you may disagree. What I think is undeniable, though, and incredibly brave, which is that NATO is incredibly toxic insofar that you can't really argue against it because majority of the country are really, really pro-NATO. It's not a vote winner to say we're going to leave NATO unilaterally. I'm sorry, it isn't. And the fact that Zach Polanski is willing to have that open debate, to me, is ridiculously brave. I think he's pushing the envelope further than anyone around Jeremy Corbyn did on military alliances and the left in general. When was the last left-wing project that's actually surging discussed NATO? I mean, the Greens used to be anti-NATO, but they were never a serious force. They had one MP. Now they're polling second in some polls. They're polling 17% on YouGov. There's not many pollsters out there which I trust, but YouGov has an A rating in terms of the polling council. It's not perfect, but you can trust YouGov over like Find Out Now, for example. They're polling 17%, and the leader is literally willing to say, maybe we should look at pulling out of NATO and having a European alliance. That is so brave, and that is pushing the envelope. And yet, apparently for grassroots left, which, by the way, lots of ex-Labour members are in there, are like, Labour's good enough when they're explicitly pro-NATO, but the Greens aren't good enough when the leader's actually kind of saying, maybe we could leave NATO. The grassroots left saying that the Greens are pro-capitalist, that's even more absurd. They are not pro-capitalist. The Green Party's economic policies is way to the left of Jeremy Corbyn's economic policies. Jeremy Corbyn was not offering socialism. He was offering radical social democracy. Now, as a Marxist and a socialist, right now, I believe in the common ownership of production. The workers should own the means of production. We need mass democratic control of the economy. That's my political view. But I also understand But that's not a vote winner. You can't go to the country and say, we're going to seize the means of production. Why? Because first of all, no one knows what that means. The average person who thinks socialism is when the government does stuff. That's what socialism is. You can't promise or even offer socialism to the masses when we haven't even educated what socialism is. So until we manage to create the new zeitgeist of Marxist's basic principles of what socialism and communism actually is, then why would you go to the public and say, this is what we're offering, and I understand that you don't know anything about it, but we're going to offer it anyway. Now, that doesn't mean we don't talk about it. I mean, I'm here as a commentator literally talking about socialism. I try to educate people what socialism actually is, but there's a difference between a political party and a political project or being part of a media, right? That is why Turn Left exists. We look at politics through the lens of the left and socialism. And now and again, I'm going to talk about Marxism and what it means to be a Marxist. I mean, we're not a big channel, so but it's me doing my bit. But a party political project is obviously slightly different. So at the moment, you can only really offer radical social democracy. But the Green Party's policies is way to the left of the Labour Party. I mean, they're offering wealth taxes, for example. So yeah, I think that's a really bad statement. Now, I then tweeted that out saying it's a bad statement. And I got a reply from a Twitter user. And I don't usually do this. I don't really want to like dunk on Twitter users. I think maybe it's a bit beneath me. It doesn't need to be on this channel. However, I wanted to make a jumping off point, and this particular person was really rude to me and then just blocked me. So I think, fuck it, I'm going to bring it up. So after I said this is a really bad statement, John Urquhart said, the Greens are imperialist and capitalist and cannot even commit properly to environmentalism when capitalism opposes them firmly enough. Why precisely would betraying the working class by supporting them be in working class interest? Again, I'm sorry to say, this is a really stupid comment, right? The Greens are not pro-imperialist or pro-capitalist, okay? They're not socialist, because as I said, there's nothing in their manifesto that says we need the common ownership of the means of production. But no political party is literally offering that. Like, even communist parties across Europe and the world don't offer that in their manifesto. It's called building towards that. So that's why I think it's silly, right? It's about improving the lives of the working class in a fundamentally broken system, but doing two things at once. Right? It's not revolution versus electoralism. It's revolution and electoralism. So I responded by saying, okay, so we have to wait for a perfect party then whilst Reform are leading in the polls. And yes, that is Purism. The Reform Party have so many extreme elements within it. They are dangerous. Matt Goodwin is a terrible candidate. He's a fucking GB News host versus a genuine working class plumber. The Greens have put up a great candidate. And what this person is essentially saying is, fuck the Greens. Even though they could beat Reform, presumably is saying I'm standing with this statement, who currently your party have 0.9% in the polls. And this is the response I got. Steady on there, Tony. So apparently I'm Tony Blair because I think it's viable to back the most progressive party which has a chance of winning. At the moment, the Greens are, because I consider them kind of a major party now. Not in terms of seats, of course not, but polling shows that. They're in the race, right? They're a contender. They're a major party who are the most progressive. And because I'm saying it's better to back the Greens, which are way to the left than the Labour Party, this person now thinks, well, okay, I'm Tony Blair, I'm pro-Iraq war, I'm pro-authoritarianism, I'm pro-PFI. It's absolutely nonsense. So then I came back with, I think, was actually a fair point. This is such an unserious point. I backed Corbyn under Labour. The Greens are way to the left of them. Like I said, I back left-wing political projects where I think they're absolutely viable. And Jeremy Corbyn's Labour was absolutely viable, right? You got 40% of the vote in 2017. And now, given that your party's polling than less than 1%, the Greens are the next viable vehicle. They're not perfect. No one's perfect. To which their response was absolutely baffling. Yeah, I get you. You only support the rich. Fuck off, Curtis. And then blocked me. Then says, if you're a Green supporter and you pretend to be socialist, I'm blocking you from here on out. You're full of fucking shit. So I got told to fuck off, and apparently I only care about the rich because I'm saying we should back a party that wants to tax the rich. And this is the thing, I absolutely despise Purism. I can't stand it. I think it's virtue signaling nonsense. I think people like John, and I don't, look, maybe in their personal lives, they're really active and they do lots of political stuff, fine. Good for them. If this is the attitude when it comes to general politics or national politics, it's just absurd. It's wrong. And I don't respect people with that view. I respect people who say, I fundamentally disagree with this particular policy, it's a bad policy, I wish the Greens were more radical, fine. And that's what's happening. Look, I'm not a Green member, but I speak to members all the time. They have these debates internally all of the time. But to basically be like max left, and if you're not the most left wing on every single policy that they can go screw themselves, you're not a serious person when it comes to politics, and you're not serious about getting power. I hate this narrative, which is that, because this person called me Tony as in Tony Blair, which is this binary idea that if you say, look, we need to be a bit more pragmatic, then you're suddenly actually really right-wing Blairite. And if you're principled, you're a real socialist. That's such a dishonest argument, because I absolutely understand that we've heard well, we need to be pragmatic. We need to meet people where they're at. I know we heard that so many times from Blairites, right? But we had it deployed against someone like Jeremy Corbyn, who was the compromise candidate, who wasn't a radical, at least didn't lead the party like a radical. He was only offering social democracy, not full-blown socialism and communism. So when the Blairites were saying, oh, we need to be pragmatic, they were full of shit, because they were pushing ideas like privatization. So when they say, oh, we need to meet the people where we're at, well, the people are pro-public ownership, pro-wealth taxes, pro-investment, anti-austerity. And when the Blairites were like, no, we need to meet people where they're at, they were pushing unpopular policies. But just because you deploy the same argument doesn't mean you agree with the same politics. Because it's absolutely true. In order to be a successful political project, there is an element of pragmatism. That is inescapable. I didn't invent this new idea. It's always existed. And I do really despise the idea that just because you're pragmatic in some areas, you're a fake socialist. It doesn't mean that. It can mean that you disagree with the strategy and you can be like, oh, I think you're conceding too much. I really, really don't like the idea that we judge people on who's really a socialist by what people's strategy is. You can disagree with the strategy, but a strategy is a strategy. Where the public are at, when it comes to social democratic left-wing economic policies, they're absolutely there. Unfortunately, when it comes to NATO, I mean, Zach is putting his neck out by even debating being in or out of NATO. That's something that just doesn't win. And you can call me what you want, but I will back a political party and project that says we're going to radically distribute wealth and power across the country. We are not going to support a genocide in Gaza, but it's probably not viable just to pull out of NATO. I'm going to vote for that party. And that doesn't make me any less of a socialist. And it doesn't make you any less of a socialist if you go that way too. But of course, I do have red lines, because I understand that just because something's not popular, it's not like you don't fight for it. I literally go on GB News and debate with fucking chuds all the time about fighting for policies. There's certain policies you absolutely fight for. When it comes to people's rights, I do not shy away from that, and I do not compromise on that. When it comes to minorities, when it comes to trans people, that to me is non-negotiable. These are people's individual rights. You can never compromise on that. Even if 100% of the population was explicitly transphobic and I was the single lone person who wasn't, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm going to go with the herd. I think that's very different to a big institution like NATO than people's individual rights. And Labour, Reform, the Tories, I think the Lib Dems are kind of iffy on it, are pretty shit when it comes to trans people. And I think the Greens, when it comes to social issues and people's personal rights, that's something you never compromise on. So I understand that you make arguments, because let's be honest, I do think most people are kind of progressive. Are most people where we're at, like proper social progressives? Probably not. And I'm not going to compromise on that. So I'm really, really disappointed in this statement. I think it doesn't make any sense. I also think in terms of like internal recruitment won't work. If it's your right-wing adversary, you rip them, right? You go for their guts. Absolutely. But if it's another left-wing party and you're attacking them, to be honest, for no reason, the Greens haven't come after your party or the grassroots left. They've just done it out the blue. People are not going to respond kindly to that. You're not going to get a single person who's moved to the Greens, sees a faction of your party attacking the Greens, despite the fact that they have a very real chance of winning the Gorton and Denton seat. And the Green Party members are going to go, yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm going to join your party now, which one, doesn't have the candidate for Manchester, two, are polling than less than 1%. Your party needs to make the case as to why they're the better vehicle than the Greens. You can't attack your party. Absolutely fine to point out policy differences, but it's increasingly becoming like attack lines. So they're not just saying, we disagree on NATO and we think they're not radical in the economy. That's a fine point, but they're saying they're pro-NATO and pro-capitalist and we can't support them. That's an attack. You ain't going to convince anyone. So again, look, I'm becoming really, really frustrated with your party. I'm getting tired. Now, look, this isn't me declaring I'm anti your party. Not done with the project. I still think that come the next general election, they're going to win seats. There's still probably going to be seats that they can win and the Greens can't. I do want them to have electoral pacts. I want the Greens to stand in places they can't win. And I want your party to stand in places they can't win. That's what I want. I don't even want an informal pact. I want them to literally be like, this seat, I can't win. We're not doing it. The Greens should not stand in Liam Mohammed's seat. I was pissed off that they did, if I'm honest. They shouldn't have. Because Wes Streeting is the health secretary. pushing privatization, could be our next prime minister, and he won by 500 votes. And had the Greens not stood in that seat, very likely it would have been a pro-Gaza, progressive, independent candidate. So this is not being biased towards the Green Party. I'm attacking them right now for standing in seats I don't think they should have. And I'm doing the same for your party. But I am getting tired because I'm sick of inter-left fighting. I'm sick of being purist and that you have to be completely progressive and left-wing on every single issue. That's not a viable political project. If you look at all the radical movements in history, I think a lot of modern leftists, particularly the sort of purist types, will be shocked at the compromises and the alliances people had. The Black Panthers worked with racists. The Black Panthers worked with like white nationalists back in the day because they had a common thread, which is economic policy. They found common ground with white communists who, in terms of race, hated them. Now, I'm not saying that, minorities should be teaming up with racist people. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, I think there's this like romantic idea that in the past, like all movements were uncompromising, and those that compromise today are just a bunch of pussies and they're not really socialist. And we need to be like revolutionary like back then. When in reality, there were so many alliances, coalitions, and compromises that got changed because change is fucking messy. And I think that needs to be understood. So yes, I'm so disappointed with this statement. It makes no sense. It's ridiculous. Look, if you're even vaguely progressive, or if you're a communist or socialist, whatever, like if you want to stop reform and you live in Gorton and Denton, the only option is the Greens.